thank you all for coming in. This is a great topic, one that if I wasn't emceeing, I would have been here to watch anyway. For questions anyway, just quickly, there's mics on either end in the aisles. And without further ado, I want to introduce, well, he's been a Mac admin for just about 19 years now. I met him 2 years ago.
2 years ago.
Yeah. And he gave me a brief history lesson on cryptography and World War II, which was really great and fascinating. He now works for a small boutique called SAP, something like that. I rarely heard of it, but please welcome Rich.
As Vasco mentioned, I do work for a small, German boutique software company called SAP, where I am a IT technology senior consultant. And today I'm here to talk about APFS. Before we get started, there are two things that I'd like to mention. The first is that all the slides, speakers, notes, and the demos are available for download, and I'll be providing a link at the end of the talk. I tend to be one of those folks who can't keep up with the speaker and take notes at the same time. So for those folks in the same situation, there's no need to take notes. Everything I'm covering is going to be available for download. The second is to please hold all questions until the end. If you've got questions, make a note of them and ask me afterwards. With luck, I'll be able to answer most of your questions during the talk itself. So, before we start talking about Apple File System, I want to spend some time talking about HFS Plus, because this is the file system that most of us have been using for the duration of our professional careers. The HFS Plus file system was introduced with macOS 8.1 in 1998 and was designed to fix a block allocation issue in HFS, which was Apple's previous file system. So along with the block allocation issue, there were a number of other issues in HFS that Apple addressed as part of creating HFS Plus. These changes included implementing Unicode support and also increasing maximum sizes and number of files. And over the years, Apple has added some new features to HFS Plus. And HFS Plus was not only used on Macs. iOS, tvOS, and watchOS were also using it up until this year, with HFS Plus being extended to add support for per-file encryption on those Apple platforms. That didn't get folded back to macOS. We were using FileVault 2 instead, but it was added just for those other platforms. So, HFS Plus first shipped in 1998. This is 19 years ago. Since then, file systems on other platforms have shipped that include features that are not present in HFS Plus. One is data checksumming. HFS Plus does not include the ability to checksum metadata. That helps to detect file corruption. Also, timestamp granularity. HFS Plus has 1 second timestamp granularity. That means that reads and writes to the file system can only be tracked down to the second. Other file systems are able to track down with nanosecond timestamp granularity, and that means that reads and writes to the file system are able to be tracked much better. Also, HFS Plus is a single-threaded file system, so that if an application is writing to the file system, other applications are having to wait their turn. So if one is kind of hogging the system, the others are kind of having to wait a while, and that's why you get that spinning pinwheel of patience. And you may see this most frequently these days, probably during a time machine backup. Other limitations include date limitations. HFS Plus stores dates in 32-bit integers containing the number of seconds since midnight, January 1st, 1904, Greenwich Mean Time. And the consequence of this is that HFS Plus's maximum representable date is February 6, 2040 at 6:28 and 15 seconds a.m. Greenwich Mean Time. Now, back in 1998, this probably didn't seem like a hugely immediate problem. It's 2017 now. We should probably fix this. Sparse file support. HFS Plus does not support sparse files. These are a type of computer file that for the empty space in files, they'll simply write a little reference tag to say, okay, from here to here, it's just empty. Don't worry about writing anything to the file system. HFS Plus will instead take up space on the file system by writing zeros for all that empty space. So sparse files are more efficient. HFS Plus doesn't have them. Also, snapshot support. HFS Plus does not support capturing file system snapshots. Now, that means capturing a read-only state of the file system so that you can roll back to it later if you have a problem. HFS Plus does not support that. And also, there's a interesting processor-related limitation with HFS Plus, which is that back in the 90s, we weren't using Intel processors. We were using PowerPC processors. And the reason why this matters is that those processors were big endian, where the expected transmission order bytes is set in one specific way. Intel processors are little endian, which means that the transmission order of bytes is the reverse from big endian. So anytime you read from HFS+, it has to be byte swapped in order for the processor to understand it. There is a negligible performance impact from this, but it's something you have to account for with HFS+, and you simply don't with other file systems. So with HFS+ showing its age and its legacy roots, Apple has made the judgment that continuing to maintain and evolve this 19-year-old file system is no longer tenable. So Apple needs a new file system, and Apple File System is being born from that need. So APFS includes a number of features that are not currently available in HFS+. The first is 64-bit block allocation. So this is improving on HFS+'s 32-bit block allocation support, and this allows APFS to support over 9 quintillion files on a single volume, and this is in place of HFS+'s 4 billion and change on a single volume. APFS is also introducing nanosecond timestamp granularity, and this improves on HFS+'s 1 second timestamp granularity. APFS includes support for sparse files, so now we can take advantage of that writing a reference tag for empty space in files, and that'll allow us to use space more efficiently. Of course, it is written for an Intel processor, so the issue with big endian versus little endian isn't cropping up. And also we have what's called atomic safe save as part of HFS+, as part of APFS. And that means that from the point of view of a read or write happening to the file system, there's no more partial write to the file system. You either have a save that succeeds, you have a write that succeeds, or it doesn't happen. And this is nice because a partial write to the file system can probably cause more problems to the file system than that write not happening at all. And last but not least, both HFS+ and APFS include extended attribute support, but APFS is including it as native from the get-go, where HFS+ had to have it retrofitted in. So APFS is structured as shown, with containers being the base storage unit of APFS. Containers are pools of storage. For those who have worked with ZFS, this should seem familiar. And these are conceptually similar to core storage's logical volume groups. In turn, the containers host APFS volumes, which are your actual mountable file systems. Each volume then generally maps to a matching namespace, and in this instance, Apple's defining that as meaning sets of files and directories. That's what namespace means. So here are some important facts about APFS and how it relates to macOS High Sierra. And the most important is that APFS is the new default file system on High Sierra. This doesn't just apply to SSDs and other drives. This also applies to things like disk images. If you try to create a disk image now, unless you specify HFS+, you're going to get APFS on that disk image. Also, APFS snapshots and full volume encryption are also supported on High Sierra. So at this point, we've discussed a number of things regarding APFS, but where does this leave us as Mac admins? So when Macs are upgraded to High Sierra, their boot drives may or may not be converted automatically to APFS. So Apple has stated that the conversion criteria is based on the type of drives, and has also stated that when you're just running the install.app, there is no opt-out from this conversion process. So if you have a solid-state drive, it's going to be going automatically. If you have a spinning disk hard disk drive, or you currently have a Fusion drive, I've heard varying stories about that for the Fusion drives, but right now, those two aren't converted automatically, solid states are. Which leads us into the first question that a number of folks may have. Do you need to use APFS on High Sierra? And the answer is no. HFS Plus remains fully supported as of macOS High Sierra. Now that said, I expect that Apple will phase out support for HFS Plus in future versions of macOS. The clear direction that Apple is providing is a migration from HFS Plus to APFS. Second, is imaging dead on High Sierra? Well, if you're using HFS Plus, definitely not. You can image like you always have. For APFS imaging, though, the future is murkier. So first of all, can APFS images be built? Absolutely. Auto Damage supports building APFS images on 10.13. However, there are EFI updates that are currently only available from the High Sierra OS installer that must be applied before a Mac is going to be able to boot from an APFS volume. So that means that the OS installer is going to need to run at least once on a particular Mac before you'll be able to start applying APFS images to it. So once we've taken the plunge and we started using APFS, how are we managing this new file system? Well, it's possible to create containers, volumes, and namespaces using disk-util. So let's take a look at how this works, beginning with formatting a disk to use APFS and set up one container. So first, we're going to go ahead and run disk-util list. And I've got an unformatted drive, disk 1. So what I'm going to do is run disk-util, partition disk. I'm going to specify that I'm using dev disk 1. I'm going to say that I want one partition, that I've got GPT for the partition table, that I'm going to use APFS for the file system, and I'm going to name the drive APFS. And last but not least, I'm going to be using 100% of the drive for this. Let's go ahead and hit return. There we go, goes through, and now I have my new APFS drive sitting out on the desktop. So how we do this using disk utility? Well, grab our disk, go to erase, just going to call our drive APFS, go to format, change it up to APFS, and just hit erase. Goes through, handles everything for you. All right. So to do further work with APFS volumes, you will need to use disk-util's new APFS functions. So to list available APFS objects, including your containers and volumes, you'll need to use disk-util APFS list. And the output of disk-util APFS list should look similar to this. Now, in this case, there is one APFS container and one APFS volume present on this non-boot drive. And the reason why I'm saying non-boot is that for an APFS boot drive, there's several additional APFS volumes that should appear when you run the list command. And each of these volumes has a particular role, including providing access to the recovery environment, support for FileVault encryption, and also dedicated memory swap space. So if you have an existing APFS formatted drive and you want to add additional containers to it, you can use the create container command. And this command will also convert an HFS Plus drive to APFS and set up an empty container. So let's take a look at how that works. So first, we're going to run disk-util list. And I've got my one drive over here called HFS Plus. Just need to grab that identifier, which is disk1s2. Next, I'm going to run disk-util APFS create container. I'm going to specify that I'm targeting dev disk1s2. All right, goes through, sets up that container for me. And now let's check it out with disk-util APFS list. All right, and I've got my container. But if you notice, there's nothing appearing on the desktop right now. There is no mounted file system. I have created a pool of storage, but there's no volume in that pool of storage. So in order to get to having a mounted file system, you need to add a volume. So to destroy an existing APFS container and all volumes and namespaces on it, you can use the delete container command. So the APFS volumes are unmounted, and all APFS volumes are deleted along with their parent container. So the APFS container's formal physical disk will be reformatted as HFS Plus as part of this process, and you can optionally specify what name you want to use for that HFS Plus volume. And if no name is chosen, the new HFS Plus volume will simply go with the default untitled name. So let's take a look at how this works. So we're going to run disk-util APFS list. Let's go ahead and grab our container reference there. That's disk2. And I'm going to say that I want to run disk-util APFS delete container. I'm going to specify dev disk2. And I'm going to say that the new drive, the new name that I want is new HFS Plus. So it goes through, destroys everything, and then sets up a new empty HFS Plus drive for me. And here's how you can do that same thing using disk utility. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to choose to repartition. Select macOS Extended, which is HFS Plus. I'm going to call it new HFS Plus. Go ahead, hit apply. It's going to ask me if I want to partition. I do. Goes through, destroys everything, and now I have my new drive sitting out on the desktop. So to grow a container, you can use the resize container command. And this allows the option of growing a container's available allocated space when more physical drive space is available. So if you want to have your container resized to fill all available space on the drive, you would use the number 0 for the size. So in this case, I'm going to run disk-util list. And I've got an APFS drive where I've got 64 gigs of space available on the drive, but I am only using 42 gigs of that. So let's get some more space. So what I'm going to do next is grab that identifier, which is disk1s2. I'm going to go ahead and first clear, so it'll be clear for everyone to see what's going on. I'm going to run disk-util APFS, resize container. I'm going to specify dev disk1s2. I'm going to say 0 because I want to use all the available size. All right, goes through, does a live resize. And let's check it out, make sure it was successful. So I'm going to run disk-util APFS list. And sure enough, my container is now using 64 gigs of space. So let's take a look at how you can do this with disk utility. So same scenario, need to grow my container. So what I'm going to do is go over there to partition, and I've got this free space thing showing up. So what I can do is just hit the minus button for that, hit apply. It's going to ask me if I want to partition. I say yes. I say I'm done, quit out. Now if I go and take a look at the amount of space I have available, it's now showing as I have 64 gigs available. So if you have an existing container and you want to add volumes to it, you can use the add volume command. So let's go ahead. I'm going to run disk-util APFS list. All right. Let me go ahead and grab that container reference, which is disk2. And I want to say that I want to add a volume to this particular container. So disk-util APFS, add volume. I want to add it to dev disk2. I'm going to specify that it's formatted for APFS, and that I want to name the new drive as new APFS, or my new volume rather, because it's not actually a new drive. So in that container, I now have a new volume set up, and let's check it out, make sure everything looks okay. Yep, there we go. There's my 2 volumes showing up now. You can also do this in disk utility. So what you do is you select your container. There's a add volume button. I just say new APFS, format APFS. Goes through, handles it for me. New volume appears on the desktop. The create verb is a convenient command that combines the functions of the create container and add volume verbs. And this is somewhat similar in its function to how that partition disk command that I showed you at the very beginning works. It will convert an existing HFS Plus drive to an APFS drive with an empty container, and then it'll set up one APFS volume in the container. And when I say convert in this context, it's a destructive convert. It's going to wipe out the HFS Plus drive and everything on it. So there are non-destructive ways to convert to APFS, as Apple has shown us, but this one is destructive. So let's go ahead and run disk-util list. I can go ahead and grab that identifier, which is, I think it's disk0s2. Yep. I'm going to say disk-util APFS create. Specify that I want to do it to dev disk0s2, and I want to call the new volume APFS. So it goes through, destroys that HFS Plus drive, sets up the new container, sets up the new volume. And just to make sure everything looks okay, let's run disk-util APFS list. And there we go. And here's how you do the same thing using disk utility. So we're going to go ahead and just say erase. I'm going to name the new drive APFS. I'm going to set the format to APFS and hit erase. So something to be aware of is that volumes hosted on the same container will all display the same size and available free space of their parent APFS container. So this behavior is referenced when you list the available APFS drive and you look at the capacity information. So let's take a look at how this looks in practice. So I'm going to go ahead and just create a 10 gig file. On volumes APFS, I'll just call it 10 gig file. All right, put in my password for sudo. And over on the APFS, volumes APFS drive, it shows up there, but nothing's on new APFS. But if we look at disk usage on both, they're both showing now as only having 30 gigs available. And the reason is that the parent container knows that 10 gigs is used somewhere, so it takes it away from all the volumes. That's what the space sharing means. Now, because free space is being managed at the container level, you shouldn't run into an issue where someone tries to save too much data to an APFS container. But this behavior is something to be aware of if you get asked why someone's 2 drives each have X gigabytes of free space each, but you can only save a total of X gigabytes onto both drives. So to help with this issue and to save on disk space overall, Apple is also introducing a new way to handle duplicate files as part of APFS. So I've got an HFS Plus drive with 10 gig file, and I've got an APFS drive with 10 gig file. And I'm just going to duplicate it. All right, that's going along at a decent speed. And I come over to APFS, and it's done. Yeah, this might take a while. I mean, can we break for coffee? Do, 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 do. Do, 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 do. I mean, I'm worried that we're going to run over time on the session. Do, 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 do. Oh, finally. But if we look at that 10 gig file on the APFS drive, it also shows up as a 10 gig file. Well, how'd that happen? Well, Apple calls this new copy behavior cloning. And it's defining a clone in the APFS context as being a copy of a file or directory that occupies no additional space for file data and which can be created almost instantaneously. So when a clone file is modified, only those modified blocks are being written to disk for it. And this allows the file system to do 2 things. One, you can store multiple revisions of the same document simply by tracking which blocks were saved. And also, you can use less file storage now because you're only writing those changes to disk and you're using the original file as a reference for those modifications. Okay, I just saw the question that popped up in probably about 10 people's heads. What happens if you ditch that original file? Nothing. Because this is being managed at the file system level, the file system knows to just keep track of those blocks and hold on to them until all copies of that data is gone. At that point, it can flush them out and reallocate them for use by somebody else. But if you toss that original file, it's okay. Nothing bad's going to happen. So one of the items Apple has been promising as part of the move from HFS Plus to APFS is a smooth conversion process. And so far, I haven't heard too much screaming. This was actually something I was significantly worried about, but so far Apple seems to have delivered on this. This conversion process is designed to non-destructively convert drives formatted with HFS Plus to now use the APFS file system. Though, something to be aware of is that for this conversion process to work, the drive does have to be unmounted. That's why Apple is doing this as part of the installer process, because in that case, you're actually booted off of something else, so it can unmount the boot drive as needed. But if you're converting drives yourselves, they will need to be unmounted as part of the process. So to run the conversion process, you would unmount the drive in question and then run the command shown on the screen. Root privileges are not needed for this conversion, so a standard user could do this. So let's first of all go ahead and run disk-util list. And where is my HFS Plus drive? Yes, there we go. I've got a drive called HFS Plus to APFS, and identifier is disk0s2. And I'm going to run disk-util APFS convert dev disk0s2. All right, everything looks okay. It's going through, it's converting. Because this drive is empty, the conversion is going to be pretty fast. The more data you have, the longer it may take. But now if we go ahead and run disk-util APFS list, it's all set up. It's no longer an HFS Plus drive. It's now an APFS drive. So how can you do this using disk utility? Well, you can right-click, and down at the bottom, you've got a convert to APFS option. So let's go ahead, hit convert. It goes through, takes care of the unmounting for you, remounts it once it's done. And there you go. That is now also an APFS drive. So I'm going to briefly discuss Apple File System's encryption. This is something that could occupy a session all by itself. But here are the highlights. So Apple File System incorporates native encryption capabilities, and this allows it to support unencrypted APFS volumes, volumes that are encrypted using a per volume cryptographic key for recovery, and volumes where every file is separately encrypted. So FileVault on macOS uses both the per volume and per file encryption, so both your APFS volume and the files stored inside of it are encrypted. Fortunately, the same recovery key will work to unlock both, but this is something to be aware of because in my testing during the betas, I got reports of folks going, well, I unlocked the drive, but I can't get any of my files. APFS will use either AES XTS or AES CBC encryption, depending on the hardware that APFS is running on. That mostly matters for iOS. For macOS devices, it's going to be AES XTS. And Apple's using FDE setup and disk-util to manage APFS encryption, like they have been with the core storage-based FileVault 2 on HFS+. If you're familiar with using FDE setup to manage encryption on Sierra and earlier, you should be well equipped to manage encryption on APFS. So just to do the most simple, I'm going to run sudo FDE setup enable, put in my password for sudo. It's asking me for the username of the account that I want to enable. This should look exactly like it does on Sierra. Put in my password for it. Here's my recovery key. And now if I take a look with sudo FDE setup status, lets me know that encryption is in progress and it's chugging along. Now, one difference that you will note is that there was not a restart needed for this. And the reason is that usually for Sierra and earlier, you needed to unmount the drive in order to start setting up a core storage volume. And that was most easily accomplished during a reboot. Because we don't need that prerequisite of setting up the volume, we can just turn on encryption, and we can just turn off encryption without that reboot being needed. So how do we do this using system preferences? Looks pretty much the same. Go into system preferences, we say turn on FileVault. I'm going to choose to keep my own recovery key. I don't want to store it in iCloud. Hit continue, there's my recovery key. Hit continue again. I'm going to speed up time a little for this one since I figure you guys don't actually want to sit around while it encrypts. But as you can see, everything looks pretty standard. Progress bar went across, encryption's now finished. And once again, no reboot needed. And startup process looks pretty much exactly the same. You boot, you get to the FileVault screen, you put in your password, machine boots, and you get taken directly into your desktop. So for your users, they probably won't notice a difference between Sierra and High Sierra in terms of how they log into their machines. The main difference for us, well, there's going to be a number of differences for us, but in terms of how the encryption works, you should be able to apply your existing procedures to it. Now, when decrypting an encrypted APFS drive, you will need to unlock the drive first. So if you have access to one of the password of one of the enabled accounts on the APFS volume, you can unlock using the command shown on the screen, and you'll be prompted to provide the password. So let's take a look at how this works. I booted to recovery. This may or may not be necessary depending on the circumstances. I just chose to do it this way. That's a little small. Yeah, let's make that bigger. Maybe make the text bigger too. I don't think everyone can see that. Okay, well, at least it's a little bigger. So let's go ahead and run disk-util APFS list. And there is the reference for my encrypted volume, which is also locked, disk1s1. So I'm going to go ahead and run disk-util APFS unlock volume. And I'm going to specify dev disk1s1. It's going to ask me for my password. It's going to unlock. And now drive's unlocked, and I can start working with it. Now, if you have access to the personal recovery key associated with the encrypted APFS volume, you can unlock using the command shown on the screen. You will need to provide the recovery key as part of the command. So let's take a look at that. So once again, disk-util APFS list. Let's get our identifier. It's the same as before, disk1s1. So we're going to run disk-util APFS unlock volume. I'm going to specify, of course, dev disk1s1. I'm going to specify that I'm using passphrase, which queues it to expect the recovery key. And then I'm just going to put in the recovery key. All right, so now that's unlocked. Once again, now I can start working with it. Now, once the drive has been unlocked, you can then decrypt the APFS volume using the command shown on the screen. Now, as long as you are using root or admin privileges, no additional authentication is required to decrypt an unlocked encrypted APFS volume. So let's take a look at that. So once again, let's run disk-util APFS list. Let's grab our identifier, still disk1s1. Now let's go ahead. First, we need to unlock it because that is a necessary prerequisite. So we're going to run disk-util APFS unlock volume, dev disk1s1. I'm just going to enter the password for one of the accounts. It's unlocked. All right, now I need to run disk-util APFS decrypt volume and specify dev disk1s1. All right, and now we are decrypting. So let's go ahead and run disk-util APFS list to see what our progress is. And we are decrypting, and we're already about 10% of the way. So this is another change where starting in Yosemite, you couldn't decrypt while booted from recovery. There was a bug in Mavericks that they fixed by saying now you just can't decrypt entirely while booted from recovery. With APFS, you can now do the entire encryption job while being booted from recovery. And this is very helpful if you have a situation where you can't boot from the other drive. However, if you try to decrypt while logged in as a standard user, disk-util will ask for admin authorization. And if the needed admin authorization is not provided, disk-util will halt at that point and give you an insufficient privileges error. So you will need admin rights or root privileges in order to make this work. All right, snapshots. Here's some cool stuff. So to create a snapshot in an APFS boot volume, you would run the tmutil command shown on the screen. Now let's take a look at how this works. So we're going to go ahead and run tmutil local snapshot. And went ahead and created it. And let's just make sure we're going to run tmutil list local snapshots. And we're going to specify it for the boot drive. And there we go. There's the snapshot we just created. So the machine for accessing the snapshot's contents is the time machine interface and associated command line tools like tmutil. Apple has so far only made the necessary entitlements available to just time machine and its associated tools. When time machine is using a snapshot, you can find information about how the snapshot is mounted by using the mount command. And the snapshot should be mounting by default into /volumes. And if your finder sidebar settings allow the display of external mounted drives, you should also see that mounted snapshot appear when you enter time machine. It'll just pop up on the side. So let's take a look at how this works. You know what? Just get rid of Word. I don't use Word. It just takes up space in my file system. I've never worked with a Word document ever. It just seems a waste of space. All right, let's get rid of it. Yes, I'm finally free of Word. I am free of what? Are you serious? A Word document? Oh, now? Oh, now I gotta go get it back. All right, going into Time Machine. Going to my snapshot. I can't believe I was just free. All right, let's go. Found Word, hit restore. Of course, because I'm copying it back into applications, it's going to pop up and ask me for my admin credentials, which I will grudgingly give. All right. I'm going to also speed up time a bit because restore would take a little longer than that. As you can see, Word is launching without a problem. Working fine. Curse you, Word. So another possibility with APFS snapshots is restoring your boot drive using local snapshots stored on your boot drive. So let's take a look at how this works. So I've gone into recovery. I'm selecting restore from time machine. I don't have time machine otherwise set up on this machine, but there are snapshots stored on my boot drive. So I can select my boot drive. My snapshot pops up. If I want to roll back, I just say continue. It asks me, am I sure? I say yes. Then it goes through, restores back to that snapshot, the state that the file system was in at the time the snapshot was created. Then 10 seconds later, it's going to reboot me. Go ahead, restart. And as you can see, I'm now back up and working again. And one neat feature that Apple is rolling into software update is that if you have a software update that's going to require a restart, which Apple is now pretty much reserving for major updates, you will have a local snapshot automatically created as part of that process. So if something goes wrong, you actually now have a rollback procedure. And also because bad things can happen to good drives, if you want to fix a malfunctioning APFS drive, you can run the fsic APFS command with root privileges. So let's take a look at how this works. So first of all, let me run diskutil list. I'll get the identifier of my APFS drive, which is disk0 s2. And next I'll run diskutil unmount because I need to unmount the drive. So I'm going to unmount my volumes APFS drive. And next run sudo fsic APFS and put in the disk identifier for my drive. And it looks like everything's OK. You can also do this with disk utility by selecting your APFS drive, going to first aid, saying you want to fix things. And if you go and take a look at show details, you'll see much the same output that I saw just now in the command line window. Now, because you can never have too much information about something that is new, I have some useful links. Some more useful links. And hopefully the most useful links you see during this entire presentation. This is how you get it all. PDF with presenter's notes is available from the link on the top. Keynote slides with the demos, the presenter's notes, the everything that I've just been speaking about, available from the link below. And I think I'll leave that up on the screen and then open the floor for questions.
Yeah, there's mics on either side of the aisles here, so if you've got any questions, please don't be shy, come up and ask.
What's the difference between the APFS encrypted and running APFS with FileVault?
So FileVault is the marketing term for the encryption. So if you have FileVault turned on, the APFS encryption is on.
For a computer that was upgraded from Sierra to High Sierra, upgraded to an APF file system, is there a way to use an institutional key to unlock that drive?
At the moment, in 10.13.0, no. I would check out 10.13.1's betas. Since they're not out yet, yeah, I really can't discuss them, but I would highly recommend checking that out.
Thank you.
You demoed how to restore a local snapshot from the recovery partition.
Yes.
Are you aware of any other options?
Because the drive needs to be unmounted in order to make that work, I'm not aware right now of any other way to do it.
Okay, thank you.
So do third-party SSDs installed upgrade to APFS?
It depends on whether or not Diskutil can identify them as being a solid-state drive. I have seen some solid-state drives where Diskutil did not identify them as solid-state drives, in which case they didn't get converted. But I have seen reports from folks using Other World Computing's SSDs that they were showing up as being solid-state, and they did get converted.
Gotcha. So maybe.
Usually. I would say usually. Yeah.
Gotcha. Thank you.
You mentioned unmounting core storage before converting to APFS. Do you have to break up the Fusion drive, rebuild it in APFS?
Right now, I would not recommend converting a Fusion drive to APFS.
Okay.
Apple is having some issues with that.
Got it.
So for the moment, I would not try.
Okay. Thank you.
Hey, how's it going? We upgraded a machine to High Sierra and it's currently reporting as not encrypted, even though the physical device is encrypted because of the all-new APFS conversion. Similar because the recovery partition is now a container and not a partition. So how do we resolve that, or how do we get the machine to report as encrypted within the JSS?
That is a tough one. What version of the JSS are you running?
9.97. Or I'm sorry, 9.101.
9.101? Okay, that should be handling APFS properly now. Prior versions did not.
Yeah.
So if it's not reporting, I mean, honestly, with 10.13.0, honestly, the easiest approach is going to be back up your stuff and then redo the machine.
The built-in extension attributes of Jamf are not correct in 9.101. Check with
Or there's also that.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
This has been discussed on MacAdmin Slack. I think Alan Golbig figured it out. But,
Okay.
But some of the built-in reporting for FileVault doesn't show the recovery partition on 10.13, at least with 9.101 of Jamf Pro.
Okay.
So the keyword is test with Jamf Pro 10.
Gotcha.
And
Thank you.
FileVault report if it doesn't work.
Yeah.
If I'm doing a shell swap, putting a High Sierra drive into a computer that has never had High Sierra installed, is the only way to get it to read that drive to rerun the High Sierra installer?
So there are EFI updates that need to be applied to the machine.
Are those available?
Are they available
standalone?
outside? Not. There are ways to extract them. Apple does not support that method.
Okay.
Apple's supported method is run the High Sierra installer.
Okay.
I will say that if you don't have those EFI updates, you won't be able to mount that APFS drive. Yeah.
Okay.
This is regarding about the local snapshots on the machine. If you're using those APFS snapshots, if you let's say we're trying to save our users some headaches, and we're automatically setting up a script to run through Jamf Pro to automatically take a snapshot every week. Mm-hmm. Is that going to be taking the whole system state, or similar to kind of how you were talking about cloning, that it would only be making or identifying those changes within at the file level?
So the way it's working now is that TMUtil is kind of managing that for you. When you create a new snapshot, if it knows it's running low on space, it'll actually delete old snapshots to make room. However, you don't have at the moment, you don't have like a predictable, if I do this, I'll have like a week's worth of snapshots. You might wind up in a situation where, especially if a user put a bunch of stuff on the drive, you might wind up with like one snapshot, where previously you had like 6. Yeah.
Okay, so you could probably script something to take a new snapshot and delete the old snapshot, or?
No, TMUtil is just handling that for you.
Okay.
I mean, I think you can delete, yeah, there is a TMUtil command to delete the old snapshots, but like I said, in terms of the kind of the automatic sizing and recycling, TMUtil just kind of handles that when you create new snapshots.
Okay. Thank you.
To kind of play off that, is there a way for the end user to easily make a snapshot? Or would it maybe be an idea to put that command in self-service where they can just run that?
Standard user can run TMUtil and they can use that to create local snapshots.
But nothing graphically?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, also if you have Time Machine running on the machine,
Yep.
It will also be creating those local snapshots as part of the...
Could you just run that command as a self-service thing where it just...
Sure. Yeah, you could do that.
Okay. Thank you.
In the situation where if we have like an HPFS Plus drive and we clone that large file and then we convert to APFS, is there any sort of intelligent, like does it know that that's a clone and then recover that space, or is...
No, it's not intelligent like that. There's no deduplication of data on APFS. The cloning behavior is strictly for APFS. So if you made another copy of it after the conversion, then it would take advantage of the cloning behavior. But anything that came before, it just treats as before.
Sure. Okay. Thank you.
So, Rich, we have serious issues with FileVault encrypted volumes, Active Directory mobile accounts, and when changing the AD password outside of the macOS system. For example, if you use a website, The FileVault password is not synced.
Yes.
And the FDE setup sync doesn't work anymore. So have you experienced this too? And if yes, do you have a solution for this?
I have been kind of disappointed with regards to Apple's AD testing with 10.13.0. I don't have a solution for this right now. I would encourage you to see if 10.13.1 fixes your issue.
No.
It does not fix your issue?
No.
Unfortunately, I don't have a solution for it. My own shop is actually shifting to the local user plus enterprise connect approach, and that's how we're kind of handling those situations where we run into an AD mobile user has a problem, we migrate them to be a local user.
Okay, thank you.
We do a lot of imaging in our organization, and if I'm understanding correctly, although it's not supported, we can take those EFI packages out, install them to our base of computers, and be able to image those computers afterwards with APFS?
I would not view imaging as being something that has much of a future. It works now.
All right.
I would not anticipate it working. If nothing else, I would say by 10.14, imaging is dead.
All right.
I would encourage you to start investigating alternate approaches now.
Gotcha.
And
All right, thank you.
Can I interject one thing too? If you're creating an APFS, say you're using auto damage to create an APFS volume, you're going to need to use Jamf imaging in 10 to restore an APFS volume onto onto a system. You can't do it with 9.101.
In my own shop, our new imaging tool is internet recovery. That's what we're using.
Hey, Rich.
No, it's not automated. No, we're just using straight internet recovery. Yep.
Hey, are you aware of any like third-party plugins or utilities that would allow a boot camp machine to also read APFS from the Windows side, if you were crazy enough to want to run such a machine?
I believe that Care4 was updating a Mac drive to work their Mac drive product that allows you to read Apple formatted drives from within Windows. That's the only one that I'm aware of right now. The drivers that Apple's providing for Boot Camp do not allow that at this moment.
Thanks.
Is it possible to encrypt a single file using APFS?
Not like that, no. So APFS is like the file system where you store your files. It's not really doing like the individual.
I thought I saw one of your screens had individual file encryption.
Yes, individual file encryption, yes. Like if you are turning on like the FileVault encryption, it's encrypting not just the volume, but it's also encrypting those individual files. But if you ask me I have this file, I just want to encrypt this one file, I don't know.
Okay.
For that, I would recommend using encrypted disk images, because in that case, you would just stick your file inside of that, encrypt the disk image, and then it's stored inside its own encrypted volume.
Thank you.
Do you know if doing a NetBoot installer will do the EFI upgrade?
You mean like net install?
Yes.
If the net install is using Apple's stock High Sierra installer, it should be applying those EFI updates as part of the normal OS installation run.
Okay. So that's one way to potentially continue imaging, but it would have to be network-based.
Yeah, basically the way Apple has it set up, High Sierra has to be installed at least once. Right. And then after that, presumably you can do what you need to do, but that's the way Apple is setting it up.
Okay, thank you.
Sure thing.
Hey, Rich, what's up? We're wondering how APFS is going to affect third-party utilities like Sophos Safeguard, which manages keys for recovery keys. I know they have a new version now that's APFS compatible, but this is one of the reasons why we're not going High Sierra.
Okay.
So
for that, as long as your tool for managing encryption is basically just a front end for FDE setup, then it should work, as long as the tool has also been updated to support working with APFS encryption. But if you're kind of doing your own encryption thing, I got nothing. In general, most of the encryption tools I've seen these days have kind of like migrated to just being a front end for FDE setup, and in those cases, those should be fine once that third-party vendor has updated their software on the back end.
Very good, thanks.
Hey, Rich. My question specifically for TrimForce for third-party SSDs. So I retrofit a lot of older MacBook Pros to third-party SSDs.
Okay.
And as part of the upgrade, afterwards I run TrimForce Enable to make sure that it recognizes it as solid state.
Okay.
Does that happen automatically with APFS?
Got
or
nothing.
So it's still re-enable it? No idea?
No idea. I haven't looked at that one at all.
Okay.
In general, it's as long as DiscuTil can recognize it as a solid state drive. That seems to be the thing that I think, as far as I can tell, Apple is using DiscuTil's detection capabilities to say whether or not something is a solid state drive or not.
The Samsung Evo 850s they work with APFS. So if that's what you're using, which a lot of people use, then no problem. So, but my question was, I don't know if it's a High Sierra thing or not. I'm pretty sure it is. But we got 2 new 2017 iMacs, and what I usually do is I start the encryption. Well, I enroll them, start the encryption, and then I change the password to something temporary, and then hand it off to the user so they can work on it while it's encrypting.
Okay.
The EFI password is not changing though. As someone said that happened with an internet account, like with a.
Are you using AD or not?
No, it's local.
Local users?
Yeah, it's really bizarre.
So you set the password, you hand it off, and then the user later changes the password?
Well, no, I'll have it set to like, temp 1 2 3 4, and then right before I give it to them, I have them set it to their password, and then when they reboot while it's encrypting, they reboot, and then it's still temp 1 2 3 4. It's not their new user password.
I haven't looked into password changes while it's still encrypting. I have done password changes after it's done encrypting, and that, for local accounts, that seems to sync okay. I hadn't looked into while it's encrypting.
Typically, I've done MacBooks fine. I change the password while it's encrypting, no problem. They're Fusion drives, they're brand new iMacs, and it's High Sierra, so there's a lot of variables.
Wait,
obviously.
they're Fusion drives? Those shouldn't be that shouldn't be APFS at all.
It's not even converting to APFS, but it's still having that issue though, where it's like the password's not changing. And so I've tried a lot of different things online, and it doesn't.
Yeah, I don't know. That should still be HFS Plus, and that should still be the core storage-based encryption. So that may be another bug. I don't think that's APFS if it's a Fusion drive though.
Yeah. No, not the beta, just normal High Sierra install. And I actually think I saw it on, now I think about it, Sierra 2. A couple months ago. And I thought it was just kind of a fluke. But
Yeah. Do you have an AppleCare Enterprise agreement? Because that might be something to raise a ticket with them about.
Yeah, I might talk to them. We actually go through SHI, but
So I was wondering, you said that the EFI installs get done whenever you are running the High Sierra upgrade. If it is not converting to APFS, do they still run EFI updates on those machines? So
EFI updates will still be run on those machines.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Do the said EFI updates, if a machine is later reimaged to an older OS, have any implications or problems letting it boot to older OS?
I mean, the EFI updates will update the firmware. I don't believe that will be affected if you try to go back to an older OS. That's not something I've tested. So on that, I know that the firmware will remain updated even though you've gone back to the older OS, but I don't know what the effects will be of running that older OS with the newer firmware.
Okay. Hi, Rich.
Hi. Have you seen any performance impacts for VMs running on APFS? Docker, virtual?
Well, I haven't tried Docker. I've been running VMware Fusion on APFS drives. I haven't noticed an issue.
Okay.
I haven't also noticed like snapshots getting faster or anything, unfortunately. But yeah, I haven't seen it change.
Okay, thank you.
Questions over here, and it's lunchtime's on downstairs as well.
You said that it will back up the OS onto the recovery partition when it does a OS upgrade in case it crashes. What all does it back up onto the recovery partition? Does it like back up the entire drive and their data, or just like a OS sort of recovery?
No, it's not backing up the OS onto the recovery partition. So what's happening is that a snapshot is being made on that boot drive, which you can then access from recovery if there's a problem.
What all is backed up onto that boot drive? Is it like all the data?
So snapshots capture what the file system was like at a particular point in time.
So if it has a lot of data, would that cause an issue though?
Sorry, what?
If someone has a lot of data on the machine, could that cause an issue?
Well, it might mean that you won't be able to store a lot of snapshots.
Okay.
But yeah, it should basically just be kind of the magic rewind button for if you had a problem. So anything that was on the file system at that point in time, you should now be back to that.
Okay.
So if someone, if the snapshot was made, someone added like 5 gigs of data, then the machine crashed and you roll back to that snapshot, that 5 gigs that got added after the snapshot, you won't have it.
Okay.
I wanted to talk a little bit about cloning, and it is not deduplication.
No, it is not.
We ran into an issue where we tried to replicate a folder, or we wanted to use a different binary like rsync to duplicate something. Rsync is not a cloner. It will literally rewrite all of the data.
That is correct.
Is it a limitation of the binary not knowing how to clone and reference blocks, or is it something that Apple just kind of reserves to the Command D process, and can I do it for directories?
That
is
is
it just
an
a file
interesting
limitation? We tried to clone a user folder and thought, oh, it's 100 gigs. Let's just real quick clone it, because this is magic and it's AFP,
Yeah.
That didn't work.
Yeah, I think Apple at this point is kind of, for things like rsync, it would need to be updated to be aware of that. I don't
like
know
the binary that actually is doing.
Yeah, but it have to be specific to that machine as well, because right now you can't move like APFS cloning or like snapshots past that volume. So so it'd have to be a rsync specific fix for if you're cloning on that specific APFS volume.
And it looked like clones and like a move command across volumes. It seems like it's volume specific. You can't just move or duplicate a large directory.
At the moment, that is the case. That's something that I would love to see Apple get there for, especially for snapshots, because then that makes Time Machine a whole lot simpler. But at the moment, it's basically all the APFS magic is on this volume.
Yep.
Okay, last question.
Last one, yeah. Lunchtime.
Do you know how many snapshots APFS keeps?
I'm sorry?
Do you know how many snapshots APFS will keep before, will it recycle them, or will it keep infinite?
That depends on how much file space that you have available on the machine.
All right.
Because it is taking up some amount of file space. It does try to be efficient. But like to give an example, on 1012, the snapshot took up as much space as the data that it was protecting. So if you had 10 gigs of data on the drive, it took up 10 gigs for the snapshot. They've made it much more efficient in High Sierra, but that's definitely a moving target on how many snapshots you can create and how much space they take up.
Awesome, thanks.
Sure thing.
Thanks, everyone. Keep the conversation going. Rich will be around, so if you find him, please.